So we are recording, heads up. Then I'm going to share this on Facebook.
I chopped this part off before we post.
Because it's not interesting and you have 20 seconds to catch people.
Yep.
Okay, and then how do I do that? That's right, live on Facebook. So it's like an 8-step process, which is super weird, but it's okay.
Did you figure out how to do just two on one and not two Arthur, two on one?
I did, yeah.
See, you are techie.
Okay, posting.
I learned Instagram yesterday, Arthur, so.
Yeah, I had to mute notifications because I was doing other stuff, but I went back and read through it and I kind of loved it.
It was very, like, I told Sara, like, the ongoing joke is that Arthur does not do Instagram stories. And I spend so much time making our content.
Fill it out.
Fill it out. Yeah, that was my text to Sara, was just fill it out.
So it says, work, Stephanie, work, Sara, Nave, Fisher, and Arthur. 2-on-1 continues.
So do I share it now while we're going?
Yeah, well, please do. You'll get yourself tagged. Or Arthur.
Okay, and then share to title is going. I should start sharing this in all the stupid disciples groups that all those nerds.
We really need. This is our conversation next week, Arthur. I think is you and I figuring out actual streamline and like this is gone. We're in a space where it's like well enough known and we're professionalizing it enough that I feel like we need to just like take that just a little bit more, and I think we'll get there.
Okay, so I'm sorry, it's now going live, so it'll take it a second to hit the page, but we are now streaming on the Facebook.
Hey, Facebook.
And I'm going to lock the Zoom meeting so that no one else may join.
This is the Zoom where it happens, Zoom where it happens, Zoom where it happens. Ah. We are sharing.
It'll take it a second to hit the page, but we are now streaming on the... Well, that's annoying. Okay, I'm back. Hello.
Hello.
You see me? Okay. Hi, welcome to 2-on-1, a theological conversation about the intersections of God and pop culture. I am your host, Arthur Stewart. With me is also your host, the Reverend Spiff Kendall. And joining us today is the Reverend Sara Nave Fisher, who I will rely upon to introduce herself.
Ooh. Yes, hi, I am Sara Nave Fisher, and I am living in San Antonio and the senior minister of Rolling Oaks Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in San Antonio. My husband is an Army chaplain, CPE supervisor, and we have 3 children. That's it. That's all you need to know.
Okay, cool.
I think.
Well, I mean, can you talk, so we're talking Hamilton today again, friends, and we're going to point that out. We're in a Hamilton series. We will have Hamilton again next week, in which we talk to someone who has just recently seen Hamilton. But today's kind of lens that we are adding on top of this is Enneagram. And so, Sara, I wonder if you might say a little bit about your relationship to Enneagram and how you identify.
Yeah. So I first discovered the Enneagram when my husband was doing a CPE residency about 10 years ago. And I typed myself as a 2 because I was a woman in the United States and a Christian. So I assumed that I was a helper. And then through the process of several years.
Helpmeet.
Yes, very much. A helpmeet. And then I discovered through some friends and some work that I'm actually an 8, so much so that I got my flesh carved for it, which I say is like the 8est thing to do, to carve your flesh. So the 8 is the challenger, and that is, as I have lived into that, I have become a much more authentic person, so I enjoy that. And yeah, do you want me to say anything else about the Enneagram or?
Well, I want to point out very quickly that we're starting this whenever we have 3 aggressive numbers on 2-on-1. We developed the pyramid of aggression. So that's our hand signal. So you all know it now. With a 3, a 7, and an 8.
It's the best space to be in, I think.
I mean, we won't disagree. There's
Yeah,
just there's a lot of energy here.
Or
ask a
alone.
9 if it's the best place to be. The Enneagram, for those of you who are unaware, although I think it's mostly mainline Protestant clergy who watch this, so you talk about the Enneagram far too much. The Enneagram is a ancient spiritual kind of practice, social understanding, which talks about relationship and what we are and what we are becoming. There's different typologies. You move numbers based on stress or security, or rather you take on traits. My type is the epicure. It's my favorite phrase for it. The appetited one. It talks about sins, about graces, about strengths. It's an interesting idea as you ultimately seek to move away from your number into essence of who you are called to be. Is that fair?
And I would just clarify that the Enneagram is different from other things in that it's really about motivation, not behavior. So I think that's an important key that of any Enneagram conversation is that the things that we do can reveal maybe or manifest our type, our number, but the way we decide, the way we kind of discern that is by what compels us and drives us, that motivating factor, and not what we do.
And a helpful reminder for all people, especially as we begin this conversation, is your Enneagram work is about you. You do not assign numbers to other people. It's not appropriate, again, because you might assign someone to be a 2 when they are an 8. So
I was just gonna, yeah, that was gonna be my tack on Arthur, is that, you know, this conversation, although is, you know, theology and pop culture of Hamilton, we won't just be Enneagramming, but there will be that language there. We have given ourselves permission to type these characters as part of this conversation, but it is when you see someone acting like Hamilton, it is not appropriate to be like, that person is a 1 or whatever. Shout out to me thinking Hamilton's a 1 now. And so I know.
Oh no, I'm the outlier. I'm the outlier on all of this. Y'all are gonna have to fight me.
But so I will. Oh, Sarah's the one I call when I'm like, oh, we need to fight someone. But so I just naming that, like, the conversation around how you get to decide how you are, like what number you are. I, like Sarah, have also been I am mistyped more often than not, which I find to be fascinating.
My picture is actually next to the definition of 7s in most Enneagram books, so I've never been mistyped.
And I want to just give a shout out to those of you that are watching. I see KJ Kim with us, and Catherine Wright, and Kevin, and just grateful that all of you are tuning in and sharing and commenting. We are trying to be engaging with these comments, so if you have a question for this group, let us know. All right.
Can I add one thing to what you just said, Stephanie?
Always.
Is that, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but for me, with the importance of not typing people, I want to caveat and clarify from the beginning that as I'm even going into this Hamilton conversation, I have been thinking about this as characters, media, and not as historical figures. So I am not about to say what Alexander Hamilton was as a person, but I can talk about what I experienced him to be in this show. And that's kind of how I differentiate the character from the historical figure.
That's the lens I'm operating with as well. Because I'm taking context clues not from history necessarily, but from like the musical, like from lines within.
So shall we begin?
Let us.
What number is Alexander Hamilton? And why are you wrong for not thinking he's a 7?
What?
He totally is. Okay, let me make the case for Alexander Hamilton.
Make the case first.
Okay.
That's probably how I should have done that. That seems a bit more like friendly.
Because you are also a 7, so I think we're going to just name that. So
yeah. Well, so 1, and again, this is going against everything we literally just said. I have the very distinct impression Lin-Manuel Miranda is on that 7-1-5, somewhere in there. I think he's a 7, but it's not mine to say. He identifies a lot with Hamilton as a character. I think some of those attributes come in. Hamilton writes like he's running out of time because he's afraid. He has operated in 1 out of stress consistently but the sheer amount in which he writes, the sheer width and breadth, speaks more to gluttony than it does to perfectionism. The whole Mariah Reynolds episode is because he specifically does not want or wants more in that experience, and he hates it, and he keeps going back, which speaks to a level of addictive behavior. Every number on the end, oh, you're going crazy. This is.
I have so much to say.
But yeah, that's what I'm throwing out there. I think he was absolutely operating in one. I will give you all that for a long time, and in stress, you can still draw on good qualities, but 7.
Sarah, you want to go?
Oh. And
let's talk about, yeah, go.
Let's talk about the root motivation. 7s are in the fear triad, and that's part of it. And I think he's more afraid than angry.
See, okay, here's how my numbers on my in my little thing, I'm a 3 wing 4. So that is the lens through which I operate. I see the Reynolds pamphlet specifically as like there is a right and a wrong way. Like he does not want to be known for something that is wrong, which is like, taking money and things like that. So he's pulling, there is a right way in which to engage the, how do I say this? There's a right way to engage fiduciary responsibility that he is building. And the Reynolds pamphlet is his way of saying like, no. Like for all of you that like I think he operates very much in that black and white. His inner critic is always there. There is a way in which to do and build the right thing. And in his own mind, and he's operating in that very like kind of cleared boundary way.
He's reframing the narrative.
Which is why I think he's a what? I'm what?
He's reframing the narrative, but that's my counter. But Sarah, you looked like you were going to explode previous, and you are our guest. This is not Spiff and Arthur Argue the Enneagram.
Oh, well, earlier I think I was looking like that because I was looking at Spiff and she was like,
I'm like, no.
So I experience people's energy vicariously. So if I'm around someone who has a lot of energy, I take it on and then I externalize it for them. That's just a thing that I do. As an 8, which segue, also Alexander Hamilton is an 8. That is my stance. Because
I at one point thought he was a 3, so.
Well, I wondered if, so are we going to all come into this thinking that Alexander Hamilton is our own type?
What a well-written show that we see ourselves in the protagonist.
So, Stephanie, when you were describing him, you even said, you didn't say, I can't remember what exactly you said, but that he wanted to appear as though he was handling money well, or you said something like that, and I thought, that actually sounds more 3-ish than 1-ish.
Well, I will say that last week, part of this was that Arthur and I both were just like, he's a 7. And I was like, he's a 3. Because I see a lot of myself I think there's a crux there of the Reynolds pamphlet for me, for whatever reason, that I could see myself doing the same. I have given away more information than is ever possibly necessary to combat the idea that any angle would come back to me as unethical or not in it to grow the entire people. It's more about my authenticity that I worry about. I don't worry about Alexander's authenticity. I think he's showing up as him. And so this week, I don't know, if he's not a 3, how am I really experiencing him through song? And I came out of that as a 1. He is trying to build a perfect nation. He is trying to build a system that is perfect and cannot be undone. And because of its perfection, in his own mind, I think there is Jefferson coming out saying we tried to undo this, we can't. There's a lot of of real structural work there that he did that is at play.
Mm-hmm. So now I'll tell you why he's an 8. So let's start at the beginning, right? Let's start at the very beginning. What happens?
How does a bastard, an orphan, son of a whore?
Yes. And what did he do? Things get chaotic in his life. He's feeling a lack of agency. He's feeling completely helpless. He can't control anything, which is an 8's based fear, right? So what does he do? He reads and he writes his way out. He's pulling from that 5 stress energy to research, to read, to figure out what he needs to do, and then to write about it. And that's the cycle that he goes through the entire show. That he feels a lack of agency, that he's control in his life, then he figures out a way to write about it. And that's what 5s do. When I'm in my stress point, I start writing stories. I start opening up 17 different tabs on my computer to read everything that I can, and then I write about it. And for me, that is how I have lived my life and what some of those signs are. So I would say for him, from the very beginning, when he feels a lack of agency in his life, he does research and then figures out a way out of it. And also, yeah, like I've seen injustice in the world and I've corrected it. So I would say for me, one of the differences between a 1 and an 8, which have a lot of manifestations of the same behavior, right, is that 1s tend to be more single track minded on like what is correct. And I experience Alexander being willing to play with a little bit of gray area to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. He steals the cannons, right? Like he does things, he uses relationships in a way that help him achieve his ends. So even with the Reynolds pamphlet, I would still go back to that 5, that because he didn't do it when they knew, he did it because he was afraid that they were going to use it against him. And in order to get out ahead of a potential lack of agency, that's when he wrote that.
And he refuses to, he wants a command. He wants a command. He wants to lead. Okay. And then we could also talk about the whole, like, it's quiet uptown, which.
Well, that was where, yeah.
Well, that's 2. That's finally allowing security.
I mean, the melancholy of 4. I mean, it could be the stress of his 1 and the melancholy of 4 that when he, like, that when he really allows himself to be into, like, he's got that one track mind that builds and builds and builds, right? But then you've got the death of his son that really kind of shakes him, and he kind of disintegrates into his 4-ness, and then all of a sudden you see him moseying from Harlem to downtown, you know, in this kind of like melancholy sadness, woe is me, you know, I want to be with my wife. Also, all of this is still just making me think he's a 3.
Well,
I find myself.
To argue for a 1, insecurity in 7, he's writing like crazy. He feels comfortable. He's trying to do, you know, here's my bad habit. I have a book list of things I want to read, and it's 300 titles. And I'm like, if I can just read all of these, I'll be fine. And that's anyways. He goes to 7. It's gluttonous. It's filling. In 1, he's the perfectionist, and therefore he's fighting Thomas Jefferson as harshly and sharply. There's right and wrong. There's clearly the right way. And then going to 4 in stress and desperately wanting to be understood as the core. Okay, I think I'm going to vote with Spiff. I'm sorry. I like the 8 thing too. I can vote with you too.
Okay, can I say something else though?
I get 2 votes. This is stupid. We'll tie.
So here's another reason. So Farmer Refuted, which, you know, as we have been talking about what our favorite song is, it changes multiple times a day what my favorite song is. But one of them is Farmer Refuted, because I don't know that I have ever felt as seen by a lyric as don't modulate the key, then not debate with me. Like if someone, because I've had this experience my whole life, someone will kind of push back and we'll start getting into it, even not over something like serious and personal. Like for me, those are kind of 2 separate issues for me, right? Like I don't like to fight with people I love. I love to fight with people I don't know. So, but people who will start to push back, and then they'll kind of set the stage, and then they're like, oh, well, I'm just saying. Oh, well, you know, and then they back off like, you just worked me all up and now you're going to leave and try to take the high road. No, we're going to finish this. And so that is, for me, that is one of the more compelling reasons why I think Alexander Hamilton is an 8.
I get 2 votes. I'll split it. I'll abandon the 7, even though I don't think I'm wrong. So, but
okay, can we talk about, so here's another reason I think he's an 8, and this pulls in another character.
Are you just trying to get that second vote?
the relationship between Hamilton and Burr, and I think we probably don't see Burr the same way either. I see Burr as a 9-wing 8, and Alexander as an 8-wing 9. Do you, Spiff? Didn't you think he was a?
What did I remember?
I
kind of okay. So I don't remember what I said he was on Instagram. Please follow us on Instagram at 211 Project. But I'm gonna pull it up. I came into this as of right now thinking Burr's a 5. That there is a cerebralness to him and an isolatedness that kind of motivates his his deeper understanding and digging into not only his relationships to each of the men and the women that he engages with, but the entire structural process.
I am less convinced on Burr as a 9. And of course, in any show or movie or anything like that, like this, we really have the one main character, right? And the further out from that main character you get, the less you have to go on. And
right.
So with Burr, obviously he's just the foil to Hamilton the whole time. And I have seen, as I watched it with the Enneagram in mind, what I was seeing repeatedly was working relationships I have had with 9s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, once I saw that, and the way at the beginning, they don't not like each other. They like each other at the beginning, but then they butt heads just enough that it turns into the 9 rage, right? Like Burr's chill until the day that he isn't. And that's a very 9 trait as well. But when I see that interplay between Hamilton and Burr, that's where I see the 8 and the 9.
Well, and here's a list of every time we've disagreed is 8-wing 9 to a T.
So I had Burr. Okay, so my original was I had Burr. Sorry, this is what I was looking up art.
Yeah.
I had Burr as a 1, and I had Alexander as a 3.
Okay.
And I will name. Hold on, we had some other people join in and throw in. Megan Peglar thinks that Burr's a 9.
Oh, I thought she'd think that Hamilton. Oh, I thought she'd go Hamilton's a 4 because everybody thinks Hamilton.
And Ryan Motter says that Burr is a 3 and Hamilton's an 8. Whitney Waller-Cole says Hamilton's a 1 and Burr's a 3. So those are just bringing in some of our peers.
I want you to see that I said Burr's a 9. I agree with you.
Oh, way to go, Arthur. Way to be correct. I would also like to point out momentarily the passion that 8s have about this conversation. So of the people you just read, Ryan and Whitney are both 8s. I'm looking here at people following along on Facebook, and we've got a couple 8s following along on Facebook.
I'm going to call it saying, yeah, just be your 8, Sarah.
We've got passion about this. Not anger, passion.
No, yeah, passion. It's all.
I don't think this is a democracy. No, you know what? We're going to set up a poll on our Twitter and on our Facebook to get people engaged. I will do that after this because I know how to use those 2 platforms. As to what number,
I'll put it on Instagram.
As to what number Hamilton and what number Burr were, sir. So Jefferson.
Jefferson. Also, hey, Pastor Law, hey, Glenn Miles, people, Allison Bright, Beth Harding, everyone watching. Thanks for shining in. Let us know in the comments what you think. We're talking Enneagram and Hamilton. What you think specifically Hamilton and Burr are as friends and foes.
And these are the fictional characters, not the historical figures. I'm just repeating it for people who may have joined us late.
Yeah, no, and Rizzola said she's not doing numbers, and we know, we get you, but thanks for the comments. Okay, so what did we say, Jefferson?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have energy about Jefferson. I am fully in the camp that David Diggs is a 7, and so he brings that energy into both of his characters. Mm-hmm. But I had a really hard time identifying Jefferson as anything that I'm willing to go to bat.
I had Lafayette as a 7, but I have Jefferson as a 3. I think that there is some, he comes in with an energy of he's got some manipulative energy in there in wanting to be kind of on top. like pulling himself away to run for president, doing some things. He has a networked vision that maybe as my own threeness I see there. Do I want to be like Jefferson? Absolutely not. But like that, I as he was like coming in, what did I miss? Hey Sally, give me this stuff. Like let's do this and build this nation. I'm coming in hot. And for me, reads and his like kind of French fan, like I'm gonna hang out with the French and kind of like get this global kind of perspective for me. I was like, I unfortunately see some similarities in that energy and narrative.
I see that.
Counterphobic 6. On the triad, definitely. Root motivation, again, is fear. I am complicit in watching in Dissident the Southern Democratic Republicans. He's afraid of what Hamilton's going to do, and confronting that fear and reacting to it is more or less. And admittedly, I was thinking about last week, this is the story of Hamilton told by Hamilton telling it through Burr. The whole Tomcat line blew my mind because I realized he knows there's a fourth wall. So this whole thing is skewed. But yes, Jefferson is, and my experience with people who are on the inner wheelhouse, there's like windups like 639, 639, or 369, 369, and like they'll go this way and then they'll go like so. I'm not saying like y'all are crazy. I'm just saying there's a lot of shift.
And when I see this, I see Jefferson's sickness, but I just am like, can we name that as he's operating in spaces of growth? Like there is energy of newness there, which for me is like, let's do this, and which then shows up in our sickness and like and all of that. So it's a little bit more of, for me, when you're naming Jefferson as a counterphobic 6, I actually just kind of see he's got that like this new energy. Let's go to New York. Let's do this stuff. And so I'm like, it just is a growing space.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like that because, like, thinking about it the other way around, if he is a 6 that then disintegrates into 3, I don't experience that 3 space as being necessarily negative. Like, the what did I miss seems like a pretty healthy space for him to be in. And that song, as we are analyzing the Enneagram types of lyrics and songs. Mm-hmm. My spouse is a counterphobic 6, for what it's worth. So, yeah.
All right. So you mentioned one of your favorite lyrics. What else stands out to you? Because nobody has just one favorite.
Oh, I didn't take notes about that.
Okay. I was just
about your own personal love and experience.
Like so many. That is the one that I always just like that is my don't modulate the key and not debate with me. As far as another lyric.
Well, do you like it because he's debating Samuel Seabury and like someone that you're supposed to be in and like the antagonist in that moment? Because like how would that change for you if let's say Alexander said that to Lawrence?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So that actually gets back to another experience I have of the show as a whole, which is I knew every lyric. I like had read the book with all of Lin-Manuel Miranda's little stage notes, all of that, before I saw it in person. Mm-hmm. And when I saw it in person, that shifted how I understood some of the songs. So I loved that lyric and I loved the song. Again, because I don't actually really fight with people I love or kind of in my inner circle, I would have not appreciated it if he had said that to Lawrence, because like you don't do that with the people on the inside. But that he did it with a stranger, with someone else, someone kind of on the outside of that circle, that is where I get my energy. But then watching the stage play of it, where you really see this, you know, like Burr interjects, like Lafayette interjects, they all kind of have this moving energy and forward and backward between them, and then Seabury and Hamilton kind of literally fighting over the pulpit, right? Like that for me is, I liked it when I heard it and I loved it when I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I see, and that was one of the moments I also love that line. And I love to not fight. I love to argue and win. let's just name, I like the winning part. But part of that for me, so we're going to sidetrack here because I will name openly that I think that there was and I mean, historically, we have some context where that there is a love, a romantic love between Alexander Hamilton and John Lawrence. Mm-hmm. It's named in lots of different spaces. It's named in lyrics. For me, that felt performative because it's in front of his people. He's like, his dudes are like solidly in the background. And when I get in my like, let's go, let's fight, let's fight this out, and especially with people that are holding my people back, which England is doing to Alexander's people, that's when you're gonna find me stepping up and fighting in more of a confrontational way that doesn't necessarily have the global worldview that I'd like to try and operate within. And so like I
thought the king was in Jersey.
Oh, he just asks. Oh, he's in Jersey. You just made a really great point for why he wouldn't be a 1. But
no, this is legitimately where I go back and
okay.
It's 1. I think it's part of why we don't type people, right? Like there's that. That oneness again came out when I like removed myself and my own experience from the conversation and to as best as I can from the lens of which I operated trying to type people. Because I will go through, like when the first time I went through and I just went off of my own experiences of like the parallel experiences and what motivates me and how I react, like half the cast was a 3. And I was like, that doesn't seem accurate. Although maybe it is, because I have a question when we get to the back end of this that kind of points us.
I'm gonna switch our gears a little bit because you said you're removing yourself from the narrative. And I would like to talk about the women in Hamilton. We kind of touched on it with Shonda last week, and I thought it was great. Spiff, I know you have a really good question, and I just want to make sure that gets, like, I really liked that one, and I really want to hear what Sara has to say about it, about the sequel.
Oh, okay. So one of my questions, as we all know, every week I'm like, look, here are my notes, because I'm crazy and take notes.
And I'm always like, I'm writing stuff down on Post-it notes that I can't find again.
Arthur's like, what is a computer?
Wait, I'll do the boomer camera. Hang on.
Okay, so my question is, taking into, I think, account all of these numbers, but again, this is not the full conversation. Right. Angelica has the line, to include women in the sequel, right? What is the sequel she is trying to name? Is it a new constitution? Is it a new nation? Is it a new global community? I think it's expansive for lots of reasons, but so the question, and those of you watching, I see Shelley and Amanda and Douglas Ann, if y'all have any understanding, what is the sequel that Angelica wishes to see herself, or the story of women in a dominant form?
So the like face value, I think it probably just was a really great lyric that rhymed really well. But also I think that Angelica did not believe that the Constitution as it existed then would still be around with as few amendments as we have. So I think that she probably was thinking what I think this character in a play written by other people was probably thinking was an actual sequel to the Constitution. That's my
okay.
An amendment or a full redo?
No, I think because why would you just amend it if you could redo it and make it better?
Amen.
Well, I don't think Angelica's an 8, but I think
I think Angelica's a 3.
3.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Woo! We all agreed.
We did it. Angelica, I will, for me, as a 3, the line that says Angelica is a 3 is when she names that she can't marry Alexander Hamilton because it is not her status to do so, and then gives it up. She's a 3-wing 2. She gives it up to her sister because it keeps him in her life. It keeps him in the network. It's the vision of like what she has a vision to do, like globally. I think also that line for me is really interesting because it does the same thing, at least in kind of theater theory, that it acknowledges that fourth wall again. It acknowledges that we are in a story, in a narrative that has erased women from it, and it is a call to the audience to say, when you do your own homework about this show or about our history, remember that women have been left out. And we cannot move forward, and we cannot build the whole, and we cannot, whatever the sequel is. And I'm with you, Sarah. I think we need a new constitution. I'm on record of saying I think we should ditch this constitution, and the record being 2-on-1. There was a really good show on Broadway back when we had Broadway called What the Constitution Means to Me by Heidi Schreck. I brought my church to see it, and it is about, she was a constitutional debater, and it is about how terrible the Constitution is to Indigenous people, to women, to all those who are not straight upper-class white men, middle upper-class white men.
Well, and I think there's something important there too about the actress singing that line, because not only was the Constitution not inclusive of women, it was particularly exclusive of women of color. And so there's an extra layer on there, the rights that white women had before women of color had. And so I think that sequel, in the way that I understand that sequel being named in the play, we have not achieved it.
So a question that was raised by one of Chandaja's friends, because whenever people comment on 2-on-1 posts, we get a notification, and please keep commenting, was did they address, because of course we have to have a comprehensive list, did they address the complete erasure of Indigenous folk from the narrative and from the show? And I want to kind of bring that up today as we're talking about this, because immigrants, we get the job done. There's the landed, where people of color playing. There's a lot of these moving pieces, and it's just an element missing. In my experience in American history, and I'm not as well read as I wish to be, we don't really talk about Indigenous Americans until Andrew Jackson when it comes to U.S. history. Like we have Thanksgiving, and then we have the Trail of Tears, and there's not in the common narrative. I think I'm asking in terms of the storytelling and in terms of this. This is fascinating, isn't it? Watching me look for words. In terms of the whole new revolution, how do we make sure voices are equitably brought to the table? Did I just go too far to the?
No, I think that goes back to Angelica's sequel of that. The sequel is something entirely new. It is not an amendment. It is not. I think we're seeing that right now in the Black Lives Matter movement and in all of this. I think it is very much a reminder that the controlling party is always the dominant party, and so we just can't come out from under that until that's deconstructed and destroyed. Like, there isn't a way in which modern America finds equitable space for all of her people without completely starting anew. I don't think.
Well, and the way I would relate to that is I have thought a lot about, as someone who has deconstructed my own theology and kind of reconstructed from there, I experience a lot of people, especially maybe when they're first recognizing that something needs to change, that they don't really fully deconstruct their theology. They take their theology as it exists and cross out a couple of words and write in new words, right? They cross out the line that says women can't be ordained and write in women can be ordained. And with whatever the topic is, it's just kind of these little, it's like they just cross out a couple of words here and there, when really it involves completely deconstructing the syntax of every sentence of our theology in order to build it anew. How do we do that in the United States? I don't know, but I know that it's not just crossing out a couple of words and writing in new ones. It's going to take a lot of deep work and a long time, and white people not running everything.
As Douglas Mann put, it's a whole new revelation, which I think is spot on. Yep, I've caught Arthur's looking for the words.
So while you're thinking, I do want to point out and do want to offer this. I decided that I'm going to recommend a book I'm reading, or that I've just read. The Pot Liquor Papers by John T. Edge. It is a history of modern Southern cuisine, but it's really a conversation about race and race relations in the traditional South of the U.S. from 1950 on. But it also discusses food and what is it to be Southern. And it kind of plays into it because I think the U.S. has been held hostage by the Southern states since its inception, hence the Electoral College. And maybe if we better understand each other, we can realize zip codes don't vote.
Amen.
I would also, this is kind of circling back to a previous conversation, but Megan Pegler noted that she firmly believes Angelica is a 4.
Eliza's a 4.
Oh, I see Eliza as a 2.
I know you do. But she removes herself from the narrative, and she wants to be understood.
She moves into that 8 space, and she burns it all. Yeah, she's a 2.
She's a 4 in her fullness. She wants to be understood, and if she can't be understood, she withdraws.
I do need to name my favorite line of Angelica's that kind of goes and that goes back to that, where are the women in this narrative and what does a sequel look like? For me, the most important line Angelica speaks in the whole play is, I'm not here for you. Mm-hmm. And that is when she asserts, like last week there was a conversation in this about the agency of women, and that is where I see her agency really showing up. Is, yeah, she loves Alexander, she does pine for him, as Megan points out, but she pushes him to the side, and then but they still continue this relationship, whatever that was. She shows up, he's like, yes, I've got somebody here who is just going to be in my corner.
Yeah.
No, I am not here for you. And that is, she draws that line. Now, of course, they amend and all of those things, but
that's her 2 wing at work. It is her showing up, being like, here, I'm not here. Yeah, 1,000%.
So, by the way, I just want to note, seeing the stage production via Disney Plus, Helpless and Satisfied never really clicked with me until seeing that, because the rapping in Satisfied is incredible. And the precision in which people move and how, I'd never gotten how good that was. Also, I had trouble distinguishing Eliza from Angelica's voice sometimes, so I was never quite sure. I figured it out eventually, but that was always hard.
Arthur, you did see the stage play in person though, right?
I have. I saw it at Fair Park in Dallas.
So I will say, Satisfied is what I named as my favorite song, because that time of that day, that's what it was. And Helpless is one of my least favorite songs. But that is something that, and I was really disappointed with the way Satisfied was shown on Disney Plus. So when I saw the stage play, we were in like the balcony, and I've seen several stage plays, mostly from the balcony, and I have never seen one that was as compelling from the balcony view as Hamilton. And I think we really missed out on a lot of that with the Disney Plus. A lot of the like bird's eye view of the choreography that is just as meaningful for the play as a lot of the lyrics are. And so I felt like in the Disney Plus, I kind of missed out on that, looking down, the view of everything working together. And it was in Satisfied that, from my perspective, when I saw it in person, seeing all of the moving pieces that were rehearsing and rehashing everything that had already happened, but through Angelica's perspective, I didn't like Satisfied going into it. And then as soon as I saw it in person, like, I had a similar experience, Arthur. I love it.
Well, and I think that I just want to name, because he's, I believe, talked about it, but I know that there's been circles, that Lin-Manuel, and with Tommy and everybody involved in the staging of it, it is it's looking for economic equity, so that there is an experience unique to those sitting in the balcony seats, which are primarily or historically the cheaper seats, right?
Yeah.
It's why they do ham for ham, which is where they used to come out ahead of time, give those that a little preview in a bit, so that if you didn't win the cheap or the $10 tickets, the Hamilton still does to this day, which I think is important, which started again way back in the day in '94 with Rent, that you used to be able to come out with $20 tickets and they're the first 2 front rows. But the Hamilton, the ham for ham stuff is like, there is an understanding of economic justice at play in the staging, and corporate Disney just didn't care about that, right? Like, that's just not part of the narrative that they are willing to.
But we got Les Mis close-ups.
But you got the lame as close-ups, which every theater person in the world is just like a hard pass.
Okay,
Like,
so, and by the way, so Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote all of Neil Patrick Harris's openings for the Tonys, right? And there's one part of it. Yeah, he was on the team that did so, but that's where he got his E.
Make it bigger. I think he did Make It Bigger. He did the theater's not just for gays anymore. All that, yeah.
But at one point, Neil Patrick Harris says, "I'm ready for my Les Mis close-up," and I'm just like because and never mind. This is getting like meta on meta, and I beg your pardon because I'm admittedly answering a church text as we talk. But
So I will. Can I go back to ask one of the questions that I have written down?
yes, please.
So I'll start here. Does unpacking possible Enneatypes for the framers of our Constitution and kind of nation help us today? What is the usefulness of not only just this conversation, but like, I guess, a little bit of Enneagram, of typing in history? Like, how does that help us move forward?
I think that it's helpful to see who's left out of the conversation. Because even like, I know this is one conversation right here, we have a 3, a 7, and an 8, right? Who's in this conversation, because we're the people that are passionate and are gonna, do these things. And some types tend to be left out of a lot of decision-making conversations and tables because of the way their personalities manifest the things that they care about, their gifts, the things that they bring to the table often aren't as valued by the people deciding who's at the table. And so for me, this conversation is helpful in thinking through like so let's say we were reimagining a sequel. There's voices, identities, and personhoods that are left out of that table, but also what identities of personalities and Enneagram types are left out of these conversations.
I was taught that the majority of the world is 6s, and then the next highest.
I don't believe that.
You don't?
Mm-mm.
I've considered that we're on we see a lot more of the triad than the other parts, but I mean, we can all figure out these things.
I think. Tell me if this resonates, because I've thought about this so in teaching, I think for a lot of us, we've all heard that the most common number is 6, right? Mm-hmm. But like, as we know, like, part of pre-adolescence is where your Enneagram number is kind of solidified, right? Like, just in theory, or in, I guess, educational theory around Enneagram. And I wonder if 6s came out of, we have a lot of 6s because we have a lot of boomers who are 6s who came out of a certain time in our history that was formative for a lot of people that all experienced certain wars certain ways, certain global positioning certain ways. And so that's why we have a lot of 6s. And if we will, let's say, this generation of whatever these, let's call them 8-year-olds right now, right? If we're going to have like a buttload of 8s, right? Or like, or 1s, or like these really kind of challenging and reforming, so that in 50 years, when someone teaches Enneagram, they're going to say, well, the most common number is 8. And that's historically because during, 8 being an arbitrary throwout number, but like, if generationally we see numbers kind of manifest more than, certain numbers manifest more than others, and if the boomer generation being our largest generation, or at least was when Enneagram has this big resurgence, that's why we named 6 as that number. Does that make sense? Is that question?
Yeah, Arthur.
I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry?
Oh, I was going to say you look like you're not buying that.
I like the idea of the majority being sixes because I think humans ultimately struggle with trusting their experience. And I think the generational theory is a really good one, Spiff. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's brilliant. I think worldwide, we may not have that same kind of enculturation. And I think the argument, as I remember it, and I don't remember it perfectly, is that globally it's sixes. I've begun defaulting in my ministry to one, I try not to suck all of the air out of the room immediately, which I've discovered helps if you're not suffocating congregants. Socially, conversationally, whatever. But also to treat, well, okay, we don't have to talk about that part, but yes. I'm looking at our chat as we're talking, but we're all keeping eye contact with the camera, which I love. Sarah, you had one thing to add.
You're not supposed to call out that we're having a chatter.
I'm sorry, we can cut this out. Like it's
People are watching, it's fine.
So on the note of what Spiff just said about kind of this generational difference, one of the things, and I could talk about this for a whole hour, clearly we're not going to, one of the ways I have experienced Hamilton is through the eyes of my kids. My youngest was in kindergarten when, kind of as a family, we first discovered it, which was the year after it came out. And I saw it with my two oldest kids, who were 9 and 11 at the time. And I, in the last week, have been having this conversation with them and asked them all who I asked at first which character they resonated with, and they needed some more clarification. And finally I said, so let me ask you this. Well, I said, like, who do you want to be? Because I had asked who they resonate with, and they all kind of had a hard time identifying who they are. But when I reframed it to, like, who would you want to be? Like, who do you strive to be of these characters? And independently, they all said Lawrence, which was really surprising to me. I did not expect that. And the reason that they all gave was because of all of the characters, he's the one that they experienced as being most authentic, knowing what he wanted to do and knowing how to do it and being willing to sacrifice to do it. Probably the part about Lawrence's ideas about the Black Battalion and, you know, ending slavery and things like that, they resonated with that and thought, that's who I want to be. So, you know, they're all tweens right now. So if we were taking that generational idea, that's who they're striving to be, is someone who knows the things that are right to do and are willing to do them, stand up for it, and sacrifice for it.
You're raising good kids.
I think so.
I think you are as well. And I think that points back, you know, your kids are ripe in the age for this kind of solidification of their numbers. I know that your kids are even doing some of that work themselves, which I think is really cool. And you know, especially like, you know, Lawrence's work with the Black community. Granted, we know that lots is left out. This is not comprehensive, and he is painted as a much more heroic character than any of the framers need to be. But they're you know, that they're looking out their windows and seeing Black Lives Matter, and I think that there's a generational experience for those in this age group that, I don't know. And the six globally, I hear you, Arthur. It's part of just like my questioning of like, because I don't know a lot of sixes.
This show is a lot of fun. This is not the ultimate ruling on anything, except maybe how great of friends we are.
Agreed. So, well, in that vein, I had one more question before we go to our final question. My other question is, do we think the founders are skewed towards aggressive numbers, and how did that, or how has that shaped who we are as a nation today and a global partner? If we had a but, and I think it's only because as we've named all of these people, none of us are sitting here being like, Hamilton's a 2. You know, like, I really appreciate, you know, Lawrence's 4-ness. It's just not happening. They all show up, and granted, again, these are characters that are framing this lens of historical, you know, accuracy. But I do think that there is something there in in the aggressive stances of our framers. And I think that they had to be for a lot of different reasons. They're coming out of kind of war, of fighting for identity and things. But it also, I think, closed the door for a lot of people and a lot of conversations for the Constitution to be fluid in any sort of way. And that's, for me, how we're getting stuck today, is that this kind of stubbornness of our framers lives on. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think you said that well. I'm sorry.
Do you think, okay, so let me rephrase. Do you think that the framers are skewed or overwhelmingly aggressive stances, aggressive numbers? Framers meaning specifically the framers that we are talking about here in this show.
No. I think Madison was a 5. I think Washington was a 1. I think we're seeing a show. Oh yeah, like a 9 or a 1.
I have Washington as a 3.
I have Washington as a 6. I think Washington was my it was my 6. Like my
it's okay, but it's a with these founders. I think it's the whole. This is Hamilton telling a story through Burr, and I'm proud of that theory. So it's an aggressive number doing it, and therefore an aggressive number is going to aggressify everyone.
Whitney said that Washington's a 9. Sorry, I'm just throwing out another number. Whitney Waller Cole, who just chimed in the chat, says Washington is a 9.
Yeah, I can see the 9 part too.
Try it with that 369.
But the one is the 4th aggressive number, and Washington is so precise, and he's healthy enough to, like, don't fight for my name. History has its eyes on you. I know when to stop. I know when to. But I can see the 9 thing. I don't have it fleshed out enough. I literally was writing up my list as we were doing the pre-meeting, which sometimes doesn't happen.
See, and for me, his willingness to pull himself out and say, like, I hope this lives beyond me, is super sexy for me. And maybe that's just because that's where I see my own growth. And like when I'm in a really great space of health, I have these big visions of communal support and engagement and lifting that up. And that's, like that's where I operate in my best self in those growing spaces. And I see specifically Washington's ability to say, I am no longer the leader that is necessary for this to continue in a way that I hope it lives beyond me. I don't know.
And that's why I think he's a 3, because he's moving into that healthy 6 space. And for me, I think he's a 3 because when he's talking about the way other people talk about him, people are talking about him as being a better leader than he even sees himself being, which I have experienced with a lot of 3s, is that the people around them even see them as incredibly successful, competent, able people. And so that for me is why I thought he was a 3, because that's how others perceive him, which was true, but he might have even had a hard time seeing in himself.
I mean, I liked your question, Sarah, of like, who do you want to be, right? Like in this, and like for me specifically, who I want to be is Washington. First of all, it is no secret that I've wanted to be president my entire life. And so that, and I don't know that I've told this story, but like, so when I was a kid, your dad sits you down. It's like, you can be anything you want. My dad sat me down, me be very, you can be anything you want to be. And I was like, I want to be Queen of England. And he was like, maybe not that. That's like a whole other thing. And so he's like, but you could be president. Like to pull me back from wanting to be Queen of England, he offered the United States presidency. And that just like stuck. I was like, okay, that's what I will be then.
If you're watching this in the future, this was back in the day when anyone can grow up to be president wasn't a threat.
That's true. I don't think my dad saw the current administration as the one in which I would engage with. And so, yeah, for me, like, I don't know, I wanted to see, I want to be someone who builds a legacy that lives beyond me, in a way that it offers my own humility and I don't know, all of that. So I want to be Washington, and maybe that's why I couldn't name him as a 3, because I don't see myself in that same paralleled space.
I want to be Lafayette because I think he's got his life together as a 7.
Lafayette.
No one has more resilience or matches my practical tactical brilliance. Like,
Well, I think he's a 7, and I think you're there.
yeah, like that's not ego. That's just truth. And he's advocating for the other. But okay. And
Sarah,
also,
who do you want to be? Oh, sorry, you had an also.
oh, just my also is my favorite line right now is "You're the worst, Burr." That's all.
Especially the way he kind of just like turns around and
You're
just.
the worst, Burr.
Yeah, no time for you.
No time.
There's no one in it that I look at and say that's exactly who I want to be. I do believe Hamilton is an 8, and I don't know that he always lives that in the healthiest way. So I don't know that I would strive to be an 8 the way he is. I really love all of the characters together as a collection. And maybe that's why too, I think that in the show, there probably were some non-aggressive stance types because we see them as kind of supporting characters to, the main lens. In reality, they probably were, probably tended to be toward aggressive stances, which gets back to what I was saying earlier about, like as I see the relationship between Hamilton and Burr is this 8 and 9, I know how much the 9s in my life who are like, slow down, this is a process.
We all need a good 9 in our life.
We all need a good 9 in our life. And so were the historical figures, they probably did tend toward these aggressive types. But I'm really grateful for the non-aggressive stances who are in our lives and in our churches and our ministries and our government. And it needs all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's what I like about the Bows. It's an ensemble. I'm sorry, they feature Eliza and Hamilton, but it is a full cast immediately. It's not, here comes the ensemble, here comes the Samuel Seabury, here comes, so.
Final question?
Final question. Still waiting on that song, Travis.
Hey, Travis, where's our song?
We've actually never asked him.
No, he commented and said he was working on it, 3 weeks ago.
Oh, like 6.
I don't know what time is anymore. Okay, so for those of us that are new, the final question is always the same, and it is the one question that we give our people ahead of time, just for full transparency. And the question is, what biblical person or story are you most reminded of in the character or story of Hamilton? Sarah, as our guest, our beloved and grateful guest, would you please answer said final question?
I will, and it actually goes right along perfectly with what we were just talking about, which is not one particular character or small story. I am reminded of the entire story of the early church when I watch this, because in the way that the early church, they didn't all see eye to eye on things. They had disagreements, they had conflict, but they all wanted what was best for this church, this emerging new institution that they were helping to create. And I think that's the same thing that we see in Hamilton. Also, I would argue that when we think of the early church, when I think of the early church, I think of Paul. But the early church would have happened without Paul. It's just that because he writes the most, we get the most of his perspective. So he's kind of the main character in this collaborative community story, just like Alexander Hamilton is the main character, but it is still a collaborative community story. It is all of us. And for the early church, it took all of them, even though we see it through the eyes of Paul. So that is the biblical story I have.
I have on this thing, Alexander Hamilton is Paul.
I'm going to go. Yeah. I didn't know if you were going to say more.
Well, yeah, for me, I can name, last week I started a demon in women's religious leadership. So y'all just get ready for that lens that's being thrown on everything right now. Shout out to a group chat that woke up to a question about me asking about the sexual desires of God. That's a whole other conversation. But anyways, Alexander Hamilton writes like he is running out of time. Not all of it needs to be said. Not all of it is great. In fact, some of it's great. Most of it's garbage. And hey, Paul. And that's how I feel about the epistles. That's how I feel about Paul. Some of it's okay. Most of it's garbage. And nah, I won't go that far. It all has its place. We can learn and grow and be a part of all of those conversations. I am grateful for all of Paul's writings because they teach and learn and grow and help me move forward. Do I love them all? No. Do I agree with them all? No. But this week I was also, and I know that I've used them before as a final question, but I just thought it was where I was at. There is an Angelica, Eliza, Vashti, Esther thing happening. In the way in which Angelica as Vashti moves out of the way and Esther kind of plays through on the rest of the story. And yeah, that's where I landed this week. It's not Jezebel or Revelation, Arthur.
I'm becoming a Paul apologist, or rather a Paulologist. I'm doing deep dive study on 1 Corinthians and now Ephesians, which was not written by Paul, and it was not written to the Ephesians. Sorry. I'm really, like, I'm not going to disagree with you on your, shut up, I'm with people, dude. Sorry, that's Houdini. He has opinions. I'm going to go for Jonah this week. Jonah's a story of humility and loss and hurricanes and resurrection. Well, I'm sorry, whales. Or big
Great fish.
Hootie says hi.
Hey, dude. Hey, Hootie Hoo.
He was asleep. And yeah, I'm going to go for Jonah. There's a prophetic image in it, and ultimately, Jonah didn't happen. It's not supposed to have happened. And Hamilton didn't happen, but it's not supposed to have happened. It's reimagining.
I love that, and I think that it's funny, I had Jonah written as like kind of, I'm with you on that there is a Jonah, and there is a Hamilton kind of escaping, kind of going away and towards Nineveh in all sorts of different aspects. I can see that there is, yeah, I get that.
Yeah. All right, well, this has been 2 on 1. We're going to wrap things up because I got to go buy shoes and coffee. It's a long story. Thank you very, very much, Sara Nave Fisher. By the way, I'm almost positive that 10 years ago, my youth group stayed at your church overnight. Yeah, no, you say that, but I think you're
the church that I'm at now, Rolling Oaks.
You're Rolling Oaks, yeah.
Yes, that's definitely possible. I thought you meant like I was a brand new disciple then. I hadn't even been to seminary yet.
Yeah,
like,
no,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. It's a small world.
I think I still have like people from your church's phone numbers in my phone because they never go away. But Sara Nave Fisher has been our guest, and thank you very, very much, Sara. Next week, we'll be joined by the Reverend Heather Hagenduff, who is a UCC pastor and also my stepsister. Whoop-de-doo. She's pretty incredible, though, and she just recently saw Hamilton and engaged with it for the first time. You want to do the social media thing, Spiff, since you do the social media thing, Spiff?
Sure. Well, we have a lot of fun and incredible guests coming up. We've got Whitney Waller-Cole coming back to do the second part of Wetter, Hotter American Summer.
Summer.
We've got Heather. We have Aaron Wathen coming on. We've got a lot of people coming in, which is very cool. If you want to be one of our guests, we are grateful for that. If you have something that you want us to watch that you love, send us an email, shoot us a chat. A lot of you have our phone numbers. Follow, do all the things for Facebook, Instagram. We now have Twitter. And YouTube. All of these things can be watched on all sorts of those platforms. And on Instagram throughout the week, I create stories for you to engage. This week, we had a lot of really great people. That's how we kind of pull through a lot of you that posted to your own stories, and we're grateful for that. So please continue to like and share, and come on, be our guest, be our the one, because this is it's a lot of fun. So thank you again, Sara. This was wonderful. And with that note, Alexander Hamilton's a 1. Bye.